Let's get some business for you. Kate Moody's with us in the studio. Hello there, Kate.
Laura.
We're going to start with the G20 summit. Of course, world leaders are starting to arrive. All eyes are on this confrontation between Donald Trump and the Chinese President Xi Jinping.
Yeah, confrontation or a meeting, depending on which way it goes, perhaps, Laura. Because if they don't reach a deal to end this trade war, the stakes couldn't be higher. Donald Trump says that he will then impose tariffs of 10 or 25% on all of China's remaining exports to the United States. This time around, the Chinese tech giant Huawei is center stage. Some reports suggest that Beijing has firmly linked the end of U.S. restrictions on Huawei to its willingness to make peace. But that could be a deal breaker for Washington, as Wasim Cornet reports.
Donald Trump and Xi Jinping are in Japan, and with their arrival comes the hope of a thaw of the icy relations that have plagued the two countries in recent months. At the November G20 summit in Buenos Aires, the U.S. and China put the brakes on a rampant trade war. Since then, though, tensions have increased, a big part of them stemming from a Trump administration ban on the sale of U.S. technology to Huawei, and that has further angered Beijing.
China has always thought that the continuous deepening of cooperation between China and the US in the high-tech sector, as well as expanding interaction, are beneficial towards improving people's welfare. It also falls in line with the interests of both countries and the rest of the world. We urge the US to immediately stop its misguided methods and return to a path of cooperation.
The Wall Street Journal is now reporting that Xi Jinping will present Trump with a set of preconditions before China agrees to end the trade war. Among those terms, the lifting of the ban on the sale of U.S. products to Huawei. Beijing also wants the U.S. to remove all tariffs on Chinese exports. In a TV interview, White House advisor Larry Kudlow said the decision on whether to impose more tariffs would be made after the meeting between the two leaders. Trump himself has said he was ready to make a deal, but that his plan B was standing ready. The Trump administration has threatened to impose tariffs on $300 billion worth of Chinese goods, almost everything that China exports to the U.S.
Well, earlier I spoke to Jean-Claude Trichet, former head of the European Central Bank, and I asked whether he thought the dispute would escalate or be diffused this weekend.
Everything is possible, frankly speaking. And I could see, of course, what Minister Mnuchin said. According to the 90% of the accord, which is already negotiated, we will see. I hope that Secretary Mnuchin is right, but I'm not sure that he's right.
The stakes, of course, are incredibly high for both leaders, though, because each of them have something to prove to their domestic base.
Yes, indeed. But, of course, this quarrel on trade is part of something which is much bigger, which is the geopolitical relationship between the present dominant power and maybe the future equivalent power very soon. And that is, of course, something which goes not only in the direction of, in the dimension of trade, but also in the dimension of technology. We have Huawei, which is a very, very problem, and also the military and geostrategic influence.
Well, let's check in on the day's trading action now. Fairly muted session for the major European indices. All eyes, of course, on that G20 summit to see whether international trade could be further affected or not. The Frankfurt DAX up about 0.2% on the close there. In the U.S., tech shares are performing better, and that's been boosting the NASDAQ. The S&P 500, meanwhile, hoping to snap its 4-day losing streak. It's up about 0.5 percentage point this hour. Well, Boeing shares have dropped around 2% after U.S. aviation regulators said they had unveiled another potential problem with the 737 MAX plane. The fleet has been grounded around the world since the second deadly crash in March. Test pilots for the Federal Aviation Administration discovered the issue last week. The exact details haven't been officially disclosed, but it's likely to delay any return to the skies for the 400 planes that are affected. The American carmaker Ford has confirmed a large number of job cuts across Europe. We knew the announcement was coming, but we didn't know how many jobs would be affected. 12,000 positions have now been confirmed as being in the pipeline to be slashed as the carmaker closes factories in the UK, France, Russia, and Slovakia. Ford has seen a drop in its European sales and is struggling to shift to less polluting hybrid or electric models. The car said the restructuring would help it focus on that development. Ford shares were up about 2.5% earlier. It's a pattern being seen across the industry, though. General Motors and Volkswagen are among the car manufacturers which have announced major job cuts in the past year. Separately, the PSA Group has warned that it could pull business from a plant in England because of Brexit. Very, very uncertain times, Laura, of course, in the UK specifically, but really across Europe, car makers trying to catch up to speed.
Absolutely. All right, Kate, thank you very much indeed.